discovered oil. Well, water mixable oil paint. I've never done oil painting, and so I'm starting from the very beginning with water mixable oil paints. This is Laura's Art Basement. So water mixable oils are the same as regular oil paints. They've been changed on the molecular level so that you can thin them out and clean up your brushes using water instead of solvents. Sounds great. I've never used oil paints because I didn't want the smell. I've been watching some videos on how to use oil paints and water mixable oil paints. I decided to follow some advice and do a simple painting so that I can just discover what the paints are and possibly what I'm doing wrong, which will probably be a lot of things. And I'll talk you through that as I do the painting. Right away I was surprised by the texture of the paint. It was thicker than I expected and seemed sticky on the palette. Adding a bit of water helped make the paint easier to handle. I started with a thin mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue to create a neutral tone on the canvas. Then I used the same paint to draw the lemons. The thickness of the paint threw me, and I toned the canvas too dark. So here I am trying to correct the situation by removing a little bit more of the paint from the canvas. Now I go in the opposite direction and add too much water to the paint on top of the damp canvas and have a bit of a watery mess. Let's start again. I've been watching some videos on how to use oil paints and water mixable oil paints, and the suggestion seems to be start from the dark colors and work your way to the light colors as a general rule. Now, the opposite is true when you're using watercolors and acrylics. You usually start with the light colors and work your way to the dark colors. Apparently with oil paints, it's harder to get the dark tones once you've already put a light tone on, probably because it takes longer to dry. The other piece of advice was not to overblend because it just gets muddy, and I guess, again, because it dries slowly, there is a tendency to overblend and then you don't get any dynamics in your colors. As I try to find the right consistency for the paint, I know that I'm over-mixing and blending things that I shouldn't be blending. Now if I were using acrylic paints at this point, it would have dried enough that I could be able to put in the darker shades that I want and they would stay without blending. But because it's so saturated with paint at this point, everything I put on automatically blends together. Here I move to the only section of the lemons that hasn't been saturated with paint. Because this is about testing the paints out, I've divided my canvas in two by taping it off. That way I can do two paintings and play around with the paint and get used to it. Here you can clearly see that the lighter shades actually stay on top of the other paint, whereas the darker colors just want to blend in. Now, because these are oil paints, you're supposed to follow the rule of fat over lean, which just means that as you add more and more layers of paint, you increase the amount of oil that you add to the paint. In water mixable oils, you can start off by adding a little bit of water and then progress to adding linseed oil as the layers get thicker. This is supposed to prevent the paint from cracking as it dries, and it also makes it easier to move the paint around on the canvas as you're working. So when it came time to add oil, I couldn't open the bottle. I could not open the bottle. So I just used the water. I just had to use water to thin it out, and that could have been part of the issues that I had. In future, I'm getting someone to open the jar for me, and I will put a little bit in a jar that I can actually open by myself when nobody else is here. It's a simple little painting, and in the end it turns out relatively fine. But the reason why I'm showing this is so that other people can see how you can learn from actually trying and doing. And I'd like to encourage people to pick up a brush and try things. At this point, I'm purposely overblending the background, hoping that it'll make the lemons stand out more. Again, this is just experimenting with the paint to see what I can do. After laying in some lighter tones, I decide to do some green shades in the front and the foreground, and deeper blues in the background. This is the very first step on my oil painting journey. I plan on doing more oil painting over the summer and hopefully learning more about it and learning from my mistakes. Subscribe to be notified when a new art video is posted. And don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video.